Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaram Hari 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 Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yamuna Tira Vanam Sari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanam Sari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaram Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaram Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaram Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaram Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Jamuna Tira Vanam Sari Jamuna Tira Vanam Sari Jamuna Tira Madhava Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Hare Rama Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radha Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Vishupad Paramahamsa Tri Vrajagacharya Stota Sattari Srimad His Divine Grace Sirabai Charanarvanda Bhakti Raghava Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Skandi Viti Founder Chariots Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Harinama Sankirtan Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Dainitai Gaura Pimanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki.
Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki.
We have some additional attendees. Future devotees or present devotees.
Now.
Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Talakaya Chaksuram Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakanvitam Scha Hare Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaur He Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Ram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Ṛṣi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil. And loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, whose praise with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nisreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasyayanam Mahat. The Srimad Bhagavatam, as the Grantharaj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God as Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Sarabhyaya Namaha, Om Sarabhyaya Namaha, Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Mukham karoti vacharam pangum langayate girim yatkripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam yatkripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Okay. Welcome to our ongoing discourse, discussions, study, reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing from Canto 1, Chapter 16, how Parīkṣit received the age of Kali, and text number 5, I believe. Yes. Śaunaka Uvacha Kasya Hetor Nijagraha Kalim Digvijaye Nripa Nrideva Chena Drik Śūdra Ko Asao Gam Yah Padahanat Tat Kṛṣṇam Maha Aga Yadi Kṛṣṇa Kathasrayam. Śaunaka Uvacha Kasya Hetor Nijagraha Kalim Digvijaye Nripaha Ndideva Chinnadrik Śūdra Kosao Gamya Padahanat Tatkatyatam Mahabhaga Yadi Kṛṣṇa Kathasrayam. Śaunaka Uvacha Kasya Hetor Nijagraha Kalim Digvijaye Nripaha Nrideva Chinnadrik Śūdra Kosao Gamya Padahanat Tatkatyatam Mahabhaga Yadi Kṛṣṇa Kathashrayam.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa Kathāśrayam.
Śaunaka Uvaca. Kasya hital nijagraha. Kalim digvijaye nripaha. Nrideva chinnadrik shudra. Kasau gammaya padahanat. Tatkatyatam mahabhaga. Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathashrayam. Śaunaka Uvaca. Kasya heto nijagraha. Kalim digvijaye nripaha. Nrideva chinnadrik shudra. Kosaugam yapadahanat. Tatkatyatam mahabhaga. Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathashrayam. Śaunaka Uvaca.
Kasya hetur nijagraha.
Kasya heto nijagraha.
Kalim digvijaye nripaha.
Kalim digvijaye nripaha.
Nrideva chinnadrik shudra.
Nidreva chinnadrik shudra.
Kosaugam yapadahanat.
Kosaugam yapadahanat.
Tatkatyatam mahabhaga.
Tatkatyatam mahabhaga.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathāśrayam.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathashrayam.
Śaunaka Uvaca.
Śaunaka Uvaca.
Kasya hetur nijagraha.
Kasya heto nijagraha.
Kalim digvijaye nripaha.
Kalim digvijaye nripaha.
Nrideva chinnadrik shudra.
Nideva chinnadrik shudra.
Kosaugam yapadahanat.
Kosaugam yapadahanat.
Tatkatyatam mahabhaga.
Tatkatyatam mahabhaga.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathāśrayam.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathashrayam.
Śaunaka Uvaca.
Śaunaka Uvaca.
Kasya hetur nijagraha.
Kasya heto nijagraha.
Kalim digvijaye nripaha.
Kalim digvijaye nripaha.
Nrideva chinnadrik shudra. Kosaugam yapadahanat.
Kosaugam yapadahanat.
Tatkatyatam mahabhaga.
Tatkatyatam mahabhaga.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathāśrayam.
Yadi Kṛṣṇa kathashrayam. Śaunaka Uvaca. Śaunaka Ṛṣi said. Kasya. For what? Hetaho. Reason. Nijagraha. Sufficiently punished. Kalim. The master of the age of Kali. Digvijaye. During the time of his world tour. Nripaha. The king. Nrideva. Royal person. Chinnadhik. Decorated like. Śūdra. Lowest of the Śūdras. Asau. He. Gam. Cow. Yaha. One who. Pada ahanat. Struck with his leg. Tat. All that. Katyatam. Please describe. Mahabhaga. O greatly fortunate one. Yadi. If, however, Kṛṣṇa, about Kṛṣṇa, Katha Asrayam, related with his topics. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Swami Śrīla Prabhupada Ki. Śaunaka Ṛṣi inquired, why did Maharaj, since he was the lowest of the Śūdras, having dressed as a king and having struck a cow on the leg. Please describe all these incidents if they relate to the topics of Lord Krishna. Kindly repeat after me. Śaunaka Ṛṣi inquired,
Śaunaka Ṛṣi inquired,
why did Maharāja Parīkṣit simply punish him, since he was the lowest of the Śūdras, having dressed as a king, and having struck a cow on the leg. Please describe all these incidents if they relate to the topics of Lord Kṛṣṇa. Purport. Śaunaka and the rishis were astonished to hear that the pious Maharāja Parīkṣit simply punished the culprit and did not kill him. This suggests that a pious king like Maharāja Parīkṣit should have at once killed an offender who wanted to cheat the public by dressing like a king and at the same time daring to insult the purest of the animals, a cow. The rishis in those days, however, could not even imagine that in the advanced days of the age of Kali, the lowest of the Śūdras will be elected as administrators and will open organized slaughterhouses for killing cows. Anyway, although hearing about a Śūdra who was a cheat and insulter of a cow was not very interesting to the great rishis, they nevertheless wanted to hear about it to see if the event had any connection with Lord Krishna. They were simply interested in the topics of Lord Krishna. For anything that is dovetailed with the narration of Krishna is worth hearing. There are many topics in the Bhagavatam about sociology, politics, economics, cultural affairs, etc. But all of them are in relation with Krishna, and therefore all of them are worth hearing. Krishna is the purifying ingredient in all matters, regardless of what they are. In the mundane world, everything is impure due to its being a product of the three mundane qualities. The purifying agent, however, is Krishna. Translation again. Śaunaka Ṛṣi inquired, why did Maharāja Parīkṣit simply punish him, since he was the lowest of the Śūdras, having dressed as a king and having struck a cow on the leg? Please describe all these incidents if they relate to the topics of Lord Krishna. A very interesting statement and purport by Srila Prabhupada. What is the word callous? Callous. What does callous mean? Callous. To become callous. If somebody becomes callous,
which language? It's English. Which language?
Which language is callous? English. I speak English.
Yeah.
Sometimes I speak French, but callous, I don't know what the proper word in Sanskrit. There is one, of course. Callous means like hard-hearted.
Oh.
insensitive, no feelings,
Indifferent to.
indifferent, and so many other adjectives of that nature. In Kali-yuga, in modern day society, as Prabhupada is mentioning here, the rishis of Naimisharanya could never imagine the condition that is prevalent today in society. And one of the effects and one of the conditions or situations, of course, is that Prabhupada explains, the more we distance ourselves from the core principles of dharma, we become, what's the expression, Prabhupada? It kills the finer sentiments within human beings. Means we become less and less sensitive, less and less conscious, and therefore callous. Yeah, and this can happen also amongst devotees, being less aware, less conscious, and this to me is like especially appropriate in the context of what Srila Prabhupada spoke about in terms of the whole Varnashram ideology. Just yesterday I was having a conference call with devotees from Ukraine. And we were talking about how there's so many of our own devotees who are, maybe I should not use the word callous about Varnashram, but who have different levels of, I would say, misunderstanding, in that they cannot see or they cannot relate, cannot understand, cannot realize how the core principles within that are being promoted, that are being put forward, highlighted within the whole structure and lifestyle in the context of Varnashram Dharma is directly related, actually, with this verse here. It's because it's connected with cows and wolves, which are the, in many ways, the essential components for developing these finer tissues, these finer sentiments, actually within the mind and within the heart, and therefore I'm in the process of selecting a name. I shared a little bit with some of our devotees for one of the facilities we will eventually have here, which will be, initially we were thinking of Vaishnav Research Institute, VR. We were even started working on the website for that, separate website as well. More recently, the subject matter has come up, and there's some interesting developments which I will share later on, not right now, in that respect, because it's a very important component of the whole Varnashram, we could say, initiative, or the whole Varnashram Dharma as well. And that has to do with having specific devotees who can, we were talking about the qualities of Brahmana yesterday, who will be able to actually do serious research in the subject matter. of dharma, specifically in the subject matter of varnashrama dharma, and even more specifically, and that's coming to the point of the title that we are on the verge of selecting for this research center, whether it should be, as originally we were thinking, a Vaishnava Research Center. I'd like a little feedback from you also here after I finish explaining briefly. Whether it should be a Vaishnava Research Center, whether it should be a Varnasrama Research Center, or the third option, whether it should be Daiva Varnasrama Research Center. There are nuances there. And nuances means, one has to have that ability to know finer differences that is behind everything, actually, and especially when we use terminology or words, then words have meaning. Some words have more meaning. Some words have, like, we say, spot on. Okay, this is it. There cannot be any other word to describe this particular thing, So, just a quick, of the three, Vaishnava Research Center, Varnasrama Research Center, and Daiva Varnasrama Research Center. Which of the three would you select?
Three.
All three, only one. No, I'm asking you. You're standing up.
You opt out one.
Varnasrama.
Okay.
I would prefer to name it so that it's exactly coming than the third one, Daiva Varnashrama.
Daiva Varnasrama. Okay, we have one Varnasrama Research Center, one Daiva Varnasrama Research Center.
I would say more precisely, as Prabhupada chose the name of the ISKCON, precisely not just God Consciousness Society, I would say Kṛṣṇa Varnashram Society.
That's not one of the three options.
because I understand Daiva is very important part and well known.
Kṛṣṇa, Daiva means Kṛṣṇa.
For you, but
not for me, for our Vaishnavacharyas. For Bhakti.
For Vaishnavas, yes, but other persons will not understand.
But anyway,
of the three,
Daiva.
I would select Vaishnava Research Center.
Okay.
I think Dev Varnashram would be appropriate. And it's more general and
Daiva
binding.
Varnashrama.
Right. Daiva Varnashram.
Okay. I am beginning to get feedback, and within 1 or 2 days, we'll let you know the results.
it's better to get feedback and then.
Yeah, right.
Even the big companies, they do that.
Yeah.
Yes. And we're the biggest company, actually.
Yeah, unique.
Krishna's company. Correct. Krishna's, well, that's the other point that's being mentioned here, is that only things that are in relation to Kṛṣṇa. Of course, that's one of the reasons, in my understanding, why our more recent acharyas, beginning from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, talked about this not too long ago, have added or put in word Daiva or Daivi, to highlight how, for us as aspiring Vaishnava devotees, Daiva means bhakti. Daiva means not only, generally it's translated as divine, but for us, that divine means bhakti. And of course, bhakti is not possible without Kṛṣṇa. It cannot be separated from Kṛṣṇa as well. So the word daiva is having that, and I would say also, I think we can all agree and understand that because for so long simply varnasrama has been abused, misused.
In India, it is very
Yeah, it's a bad.
something which people immediately start.
Right, it's a bad word. It's a bad.
Because it's
whatever.
like you are
Yes.
Śūdra down and
Yes, correct. Yeah. Word varnasrama is a bad word. Śūdra is a bad word. Even Brahmana is a bad word for some.
but in India, because of this all disparity and all, they have taken varnashram as something which is which should not be practiced.
So my small realization quite some time back is as follows: that I see what we are endeavoring to do. I see what Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish. Something very similar to what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did, 150 years ago, when the word Vaishnava was a bad word. The word Vaishnavi actually in those days meant prostitute. Really. The word Vaishnavi 150 years ago meant prostitute. Why? Because in the name of Vaishnavism, in the names of the chanting of the holy name, using Mahaprabhu's whole movement, people were, all of these apasampradayas.
Practicing all kind of nonsense.
Yes. And so, one of the foremost, we could say, successes of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was to change that, was to begin highlighting the real meaning, the real purport, proper understanding of Vaishnava and Vaishnavi, and introducing the pure teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, and now we know, of course, with has taken place afterwards with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada and so many other personalities, but these two especially, the whole teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu have been restored, although there are flaws in terms of how people who are practicing are purely representing, but the the intent is there, and also there are so many examples of personalities who have demonstrated also, who have been example of these pure teachings. So we now have a similar type of, we could say, challenge to establish the purity and the real purpose and intent of Varnashrama Dharma. And that challenge begins with our own devotees, amongst our own devotees, to understand that, because like in the conversation I was having yesterday, one devotee was mentioning how one of the arguments being presented is that, we have to stick to the pure practices and pure teachings, which is just, absorb yourself in the chanting of the holy name and engage in all kinds of devotional activities. And whereas if you start talking about and developing the whole varnashrama aspect, then it's like you're getting away from the pure. You're getting away from the pure teachings, more or less. And you will have less time for practicing and so many things. You are adopting some mundane, basically the message is like that. But here Prabhupada is mentioning very clearly, and has mentioned as well in so many other places, how things like sociology, things like economics, because in Varnashrama you have to deal with economics. And the proper understanding, which we are not understanding, unfortunately, even as devotees, the proper understanding, although we mention it so often, but it's just like taking a long time to sink in, the proper understanding of economics, proper economics, Vedic economics, sustainable economics, scientific economics, starts with cows. and land. Yeah, Krishi Goraksha. Krishi Goraksha Vanijam Vaishya Karma Subhavajam is the formula for Vedic economics. And Prabhupada mentions in purports, specifically in the Canto, I believe chapter 11, the first of the 5 chapters where Narada Muni elaborates in detail how, and this difficult for the majority of our householders, now we have only 2 householders here, majority of our householders cannot grasp, cannot understand, or at least they're not acting on it. There might be some good reasons, but how Prabhupada is telling the vast majority of householders are meant to be engaged in activities connected with cows and land, because that is meant to be the norm in terms of how we meet all of our different necessities of life, isn't it? So that happens occasionally. Hare Krishna.
Without Varnashram, they don't agree. They are in influence of Kali.
Yes. So it's a whole endeavor. Well, nothing comes without endeavor. From the time, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to turn the tide, practically speaking, had to reestablish, because we cannot imagine, we were not there at that time, we hear a little bit about it, we read how during the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the whole movement of Lord Chaitanya for about 300 years had gone off track.
Almost lost.
Yes.
Not very lost, it's negative.
Yes.
Kind of Papa Sampradaya, the practice.
Yes, yes, that was prominent. And that was basically, that had become the norm.
Makes it even more difficult to establish.
Right. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did a miracle in reversing that, and that has continued and continues to this time. But the completion of that will be when we have a proper understanding and when we can actually begin to apply ideology of, Prabhupada mentions, so I can speak about it, of sociology, of specifically Vedic sociology. Varnashram actually means Vedic sociology. And it's interesting because both Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Prabhupada have in different places mentioned how they're making that direct connection, that sociology for us as devotees, as Vaishnavas, means Varnashrama. Vedic sociology means Vedic, the Varnashrama, Daiva Varnashrama specifically, where the focus in the center. And therefore, that's why we have statements by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in addition to Srila Prabhupada, but specifically Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioning that when we understand and agree to be part of and live within the framework of the designated system of Varna and Ashrama, keeping Kṛṣṇa in the center, they become transcendental. They don't create karmic reaction. So, in many places also, Prabhupada would say the same that he's telling here, that politics, generally we think politics, devotees have nothing to do with politics. Well, devotees have everything to do with politics. With Vedic politics, with Kṛṣṇa's politics. Because politics, we can't speak about leaders or kshatriyas within society unless you talk about politics. So, so this is the very much, in many ways, the core of the challenge that we have is to put Kṛṣṇa, to make devotees see and understand Kṛṣṇa in the center and in the heart of this whole aspect of dharma, varnashrama dharma. Otherwise there is that tendency, and I believe this is what I've not studied in detail, but if we want to, why, the question is, why is it that soon after the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya, the whole movement went astray? So I would suggest that it is definitely, if not the main reason, but it is definitely part of the reason when we overemphasize one aspect of dharma, which is the spiritual dimension, and neglect the other aspect of dharma, which is also described and for which there are specific sciences also. When we don't keep the proper balance between these two, then it will create situations which will not be healthy. There's different ways of putting it, I suppose. In other words, it comes back to what we were mentioning, what Prabhupada reminded us, when there's a disparity between religion and philosophy. That's connected in the sense that if we overly stress the spiritual without taking into consideration the material aspect, then we will have well, the best way I can put it is an imbalance. It's just like every day we have to look after this body. Every day we have some material duties and responsibilities. It's there also in the nectar devotion. We have to take bath every day. We have to give some minimum care to the body. Some people become avadut, but that's not the norm, right? So here the rishis, Śaunaka Ṛṣi, who's speaking on behalf of the assembled rishis, were astonished. That's the beginning of the whole, that's a statement, the text itself, and also Prabhupada in the very beginning of the purport mentions how it was expected that Parīkṣit Maharaj should have killed immediately the culprit for two reasons. What are the two reasons?
He was deceiving people
Yes.
by wearing the garb of the king.
Correct.
And then he was abusing the cow and bull.
Well, yes.
Because Prabhupada also mentions about the modern leaders are just
Yes.
Śūdras in the garb of king.
No, less than Śūdra.
Yeah, even less than Śūdra.
Correct. Yes, yes.
And then slaughter is sanctioned by the government.
Yes.
So then
So something is not.
we have to have our own leadership.
Yes.
I think we should envision a village where we have our own leadership.
Yes. Well, by definition and by nature, a village is self-governed.
Right.
And traditionally we hear also how they were allowed to punish when people were deviating in different ways. And villages, traditional Vedic villages, were very much following and keeping with the principles of dharma, because that was the culture. I mean, that is the only culture, the principles of dharma. So that's why, unless we have trained individuals in all of these different areas, that's why Varnashram College is so obviously needed, then we will remain in a kind of deplorable situation in which we find ourselves. I mean, yeah. Additional thoughts or
So we see in the 7th canto that the first part of the 7th canto is how a pure devotee living in the world in a very difficult situation. And that's the example that Srimad Bhagavatam is focusing on Krishna and pure devotees of Krishna. But then the second part of the 7th canto, the same, directly after that pure devotion, the 10th chapter speaking about the pure devotional service, 5 chapters seemingly dealing with mundane topics.
Varnashram. Right.
Varnashram. So we have to research how the two topics in one canto, it's not by chance Vyasadi put there. We have to understand that after we understand the pure devotional service at some level, we immediately have to deal with these seemingly material topics, otherwise something will not happen. Maybe only pure devotees and mundane people will live in the world, which is okay, but we cannot connect the two. So we have preaching programs also for pure devotees. So not all the pure devotees just go to the forest and practice pure devotional service like in Vrindavan, no, but other places also.
Yes.
Pure devotees like Maharaj.
Grihasthas. We have many grihasthas. Yes.
So they have to have a space, have to have a understanding. So that's part, give them understanding.
There is a very important, pertinent point you're making, how in the same canto, there are 15 chapters in the 7th canto, and the first 10 are dealing especially with, pure devotional service, and the last 5 are dealing with something that, Varnashram, which is maybe more material. There's a very interesting statement which I have to find again in the Bhagavatam, where Prabhupada mentions, when I read it, I said, wow. Prabhupada, and I paraphrase here, he mentions that one has to have a certain kind of advancement. One has to be advanced in such a way. Only one who's advanced in Krishna consciousness can one understand this whole dimension of Varnashrama. Prabhupada mentions like this. Because it's like, yes, we understand the dangers and the perils of becoming materially entangled. At the same time, we know that Krishna's material energy is his energy, and when properly utilized in his service, then it becomes completely spiritualized. It is all spiritual. And Prabhupada even makes a point in the series of lectures on the nectar of devotion that for a pure devotee, everything is spiritual. He sees everything as spiritual. So okay, we're not at that level, but theoretically we can understand that the more we dovetail all things in Krishna's service, and the whole, see, that's the whole irony in one sense, the whole irony, and this is such a powerful statement that I've mentioned this before. It's in the first canto also. There it is. Just fell on it.
In seventh canto also, 7:11 to Sanatana Dharma means devotional service. This eternal occupational duty can organize through institution of varnashram.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes Prabhupada equates Sanatana Dharma with varnashram Dharma. And here in the 9...
Here he's saying Sanatana Dharma means devotional service.
Right. Yes. So Sanatana Dharma, see, what we fail to understand, it's a very interesting and very important concept. What we fail to understand is that it's not only bhakti in terms of pure devotional service, that is eternal. I mean, bhakti is eternal. Devotional service is the eternal, natural activity of the spirit soul. What is also eternal is that system created by Kṛṣṇa called varnashrama. It is eternally meant to be the perfect system by which we more easily can develop and advance in Krishna consciousness. Listen to this first line of the purport, chapter 9, text 26.
9:26.
First canto, chapter 9, 26. It is the very first instruction of Grandfather Bhishmadev being given to Yudhishthira Maharaj. And that first instruction, well, I'll just read it. Text 26, at Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry, Bhishmadev first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. The first thing he speaks about is about varnashram. And what does Prabhupada say in the purport? The very first line, the conception of 4 castes and 4 orders of life as planned by the Lord himself, 4:13, is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity and thus act accordingly to get free from the material bondage or conditioned life. It's a very important, very strong statement being made here by Srila Prabhupada, that this system is meant to help us, is meant to accelerate the process of us becoming Krishna conscious. So if we just irresponsibly reject the system that is meant to help us become Krishna conscious more quickly, to accelerate, Prabhupada used the word accelerate, then we're missing something. We're not understanding. And in so many places, whether in purports, in the Bhagavatam, or in conversations, like that whole misunderstanding that was brought up yesterday in the conversation also, the question being that Maharaj, in the conversation between Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya rejected varnashram. Well, that's just, I'm saying, I know, we know, but most people don't. People will say like this, even devotees will say. But Lord Chaitanya rejected varnashram as being the ultimate goal
Right. I mean,
of life. Yeah, right.
According to a context.
Yeah.
What is happening.
Right. People like to choose whatever.
Right.
So So the point, yeah. So the point being that that when Prabhupada was having a discussion on this very point with some of the senior devotees, senior disciples, one of the arguments presented by a devotee at that time was that the Prabhupada, up until now, and this maybe is like 1974, after many years of ISKCON being established, this devotee is telling, but Prabhupada, I thought, all we need to do is chant Hare Krishna, engage in devotional activities, follow the principles, and this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. We are Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas, we just need to concentrate on these devotional activities. And then Prabhupada, famous statement, it is not so easy to be Vaishnava. And then he continues in that same conversation, and to become Vaishnava, Varnashrama is necessary.
That is great.
Yeah, people, they prefer not reading that portion, or they neglect it or whatever. So for the vast majority of people, that is mentioned by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also. I mentioned that yesterday in the Sadhana Toshani. Varnashrama is for the Vaishnavas in their conditioned state. It's not to degrade Vaishnavas. It's simply to be realistic. Varnashrama, as given by Kṛṣṇa himself in the Bhagavad Gita, is that system for Vaishnavas. It's not for the karmis. It's for everyone, including the karmis, but it's also for Vaishnavas in their conditioned state, because that's another misunderstanding, that Varnashram is not for devotees.
The misunderstanding is that practicing devotees and Vaishnava are the same. So,
yeah, right.
Vaishnava, it means somebody already.
We're mixing the pure devotees with the non-pure devotees.
Right, practicing devotees.
Practicing devotees. Yeah.
Or aspiring.
Students, you miss with your professor.
Right.
Because they are in the same university.
You're right. Yeah.
Professor.
There is somewhat of a difference between the professor and the student. And if we forget that, yeah, right. So this requires our devotees to hear more from, directly from Srila Prabhupada, because he's the one, and our other Vaishnavacharyas who have clarified and on a number of occasions have discussed, these points.
I wanted to know your thoughts on one matter regarding Varnashram, which is very prominently discussed when the topic of Varnashram is raised, but most of the times it's wrongly discussed.
Yes.
It's regarding the topic of qualification based on Janma and Karma. There are many misconceptions.
Qualification based on?
Janma and Karma.
Janma and Karma. Yes.
This is mostly discussed when the topic of Varnashram is raised. And many times I see that devotees go to the extreme and disregard any one of them. Either Janma they disregard, either Karma they disregard. But we see that at the time of Kṛṣṇa, at the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, the qualifications were based on Janma. And we see that Srila Haridas Thakur was although qualified even beyond Brahman, but he was not offered sacred thread. And at the time of Kṛṣṇa, we see that Vidur was also of level of a Brahman, but he was not offered a sacred thread because he was not a Vaishya, neither Kshatriya, neither Brahman. So we need to see the sociological structure of the time when we are doing things. At that time, the condition was supported on Janma. But yes, today it's not completely possible. But when we see that devotees are completely disregarding the entire system, to establish one system, they are disregarding the entire another system which was going on eternally. So, what are your thoughts on this? What is harmonization between this?
Both, it's quite interesting because this is also clarified by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur when he speaks in the context of identifying or understanding the varna of an individual. Because varna is connected with janma and karma also. And so there's a Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains how establishing, the nature of an individual, specifically the varna, is something very essential in the context of varnashrama society. And he prescribes some system and some ways. And after speaking on the subject matter, mentioning that before the age of 15 in the village, the elder brahmanas, the most senior brahmanas, along with some other seniors within the village, some of the leaders, are meant to establish and determine the varna of a young boy before he reaches the age of 15. So in that conversation, one question comes up is the varna, and one of them actually is family tradition. Means in what family you're born in. So in other words, that's an important consideration.
Right.
But Shastra is telling that is not the only consideration, but this is a very important consideration. And therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions how we should assume, for that was 150 years ago or more, where the situation was different than it is today. Today things have become much more degraded, fallen, and more further away from the Vedic culture. So at that time, in that particular conversation, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions that we will first assume that someone who is born in a particular family is meant to be, or will be, in all likelihood, a Brahmana. If one is born in a Brahmana family.
Okay.
Because as he rightly mentions, even today there's a school of thought that is very strong and rigid on this point, that you can only be a Brahmana if you are born in a Brahmana family. You can otherwise not become a bona fide or qualified Brahmana.
Similarly, like Kshatriya. Karna was not born in Kshatriya family, and he was not taught.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we are in a situation. So in other words, there are different things to be said. One is that there needs to be given proper consideration to the family in which one is born, and there needs to be also proper consideration in terms of the activities or the karma, or what are the natural qualities that are being shown or developed by that particular individual. We are in such a situation now, in terms of where we stand in modern day society, and specifically within the context of our society, for example, where our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada has very clearly indicated that we need to reintroduce this eternal system, of varnashrama, and therefore we will we will only be able to understand more clearly how to go about doing that, because right now it's very unclear, and even it's, the whole concept in itself is kept at bay, or even by some devotees is being minimized or even rejected. So the point being that we know, anyone who gives sufficient time, that there's absolutely no way that we can reject that system, because it's Krishna's system, it's an eternal system, and it requires that we give the proper time and that we give the proper training. So therefore, because we're so far removed and so disconnected with what is meant to be the original pure system, so it will take us some time, and that may, the application, how we will apply, we may have to adjust according to our situation, according to the social situation in which we find ourselves, both within our own, let's say, ISKCON society, and also within general society. So I would say that we need to be somewhat flexible, but we can immediately should understand that we cannot simply base things on birth, nor can we cannot, in other words, go to extremes. We have to be what is more in terms of the middle and to balance things. Go ahead, yes.
Very interesting observation. That's right. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm foreseeing that a village which has got now, according to the say guna and karma, not about birth. Let's birth has been already there, but birth is mostly, we can look into the Indian systems. Those who are born in Indian body, okay, we can look in the lineage.
Yeah, right. Outside, right.
Like
Okay.
I can look in my lineage.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Yeah.
But then we have got, that so-called a mixed society, and there we can only opt out with the guna and karma, the quality of the person and what he's doing.
Sure, yes.
And then I'm just little bit, this is an observation.
Yes.
When further our families, like those families are there, wouldn't it be good that Kshatriya Guna Karma family should take that as a lineage further, rather than saying that we are beyond it, so we all
right,
do the devotional service,
right,
that's fine.
Right.
But then a Kshatriya family should probably take a boy from a Kshatriya family girl, and then have that, so that the system can be revived.
Yeah, correct.
Otherwise, the system will never be revived.
No, I mean, we definitely, and that can only start, as you rightly observed, that can only start with those who are born in India. Not, because there is that tradition.
Is there. I mean, we have people, say, from the Western family, like Prabhupada mentioned, that it's everywhere. The Chaturvarnyam system is everywhere. In one sense that people have got this quality of either Brahminical or Kshatriya or
But, of course, that is there. But the point I'm trying to make is that, for example, it's easier to establish the gotra of someone from India than it is from someone like from Canada. Where, you can, like one of our family members, some years back, quite a few years back, traced our family, going back like 7 generations to France.
Okay.
Now somebody from there should have to again go back and see, because Prabhupada mentioned, isn't it, that one day in a lecture in America to his disciples, how many of you in America are descendants from the European stock. And then he makes the connection with Parashuram, who chased out the Kshatriyas and who went to different places, including Europe. It doesn't mean that everyone in America is a Kshatriya, but in other words, it's more difficult to trace things, to trace family heritage, for example, for people in the Western world than it is for people in India, where there are still, even in some places, history is there or record there or whatever. But yeah, the point you're making, if I understand correctly, is that it will be helpful, and it is very much part of the whole Varnashrama initiative as well, to give importance to the different lineages, to the different classes, the different varnas, etc. Yeah, right. Yeah, so it's a whole, it's a very big, that's why we need this research center. That's why we need this, we need individuals who will be able to deeply study these subject matters and write on these subject matters, this discourse on these subject matters, so that our devotees to begin with can have a more clear understanding, because that clear understanding is not there now, and that's part of the challenge that we have right now, to reestablish the glories. The glories, actually, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur established the glories of Vaishnavism, of Vaishnavas, so we need to establish the glories of Varnashrama, of Daiva Varnashrama. How it is Kṛṣṇa's perfect system to help us become devotees. And unless we understand this and accept this, then we'll have a tendency to become sahajas. Because we will not be able to keep the proper balance. And Prabhupada even makes the following statement, in the whole context of the conversation. Prabhupada says, and Lord Chaitanya, he was in Jagannath Puri, and he was fully absorbed in his mood of separation from Vrindavan. We will not and cannot imitate Lord Chaitanya. We will not follow, just imagine, we will not follow Lord Chaitanya in that respect. And Prabhupada mentioning the same point. Where are the Haridas Thakurs? Who can do like Haridas Thakur and chant 22 hours a day? So therefore, it means that for the vast majority, maybe not 108%.
99.9%.
Yes. Varnashrama needs to be followed.
And I think even this, quickly, just making that, the education of ladies is also important.
That's a whole Bhagavatam class.
Yeah, I'm saying
or
that
more.
Because there had been Brahmanis and Kshatranis. And if these boys and girls will not be matching.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but that's a whole other topic.
No, we'll not take up that.
Right, yeah. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Jai Sri Prabhupada Ki. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your feedback.